Tribal council. The earliest form of government was simple, small groups sitting together and making decisions. Tribes often relied on elders or respected leaders to guide them. Think of it like a family meeting where the oldest members decide what's best for everyone. This worked well when communities were small and everyone knew each other personally. Decisions could be discussed face to face, but there was a limit. Once tribes grew larger, it became harder for every voice to be heard. Without written laws or structured systems, disagreements could split people apart. Imagine your entire school trying to solve problems by crowding into one classroom and shouting ideas until someone gave in. It just wouldn't scale. Chiefdom. As populations expanded, tribes shifted into chiefdoms. Here, one person, the chief, held permanent authority. Chiefs were often believed to have divine blessing, unique wisdom, or a sacred bloodline. They could settle disputes, lead in war, or manage resources. Picture your sports team having one permanent captain who makes every call, not just during the game, but in daily life too. This gave communities more stability, but it wasn't perfect. A strong, wise chief could bring peace and prosperity, but a selfish or weak one could abuse power, play favorites, or make choices that dragged the whole group down. And since leadership was often inherited, you didn't always get the best person for the job. Monarchy. From chiefdoms grew monarchies, where kings and queens ruled entire kingdoms. Power usually passed down through families, so if your parent was king, you were next in line. Monarchies gave clear direction and stability since everyone knew who was in charge. There were two main types. Absolute monarchies placed total control in the ruler's hands, like Louis XV of France, who famously said, "I am the state." On the other hand, constitutional monarchies, like modern Britain or Japan, keep the king or queen mostly as symbolic figures, while elected officials run the government. Monarchies could unify nations, but they also had major risks. An absolute monarchy gave citizens little or no say. If you had a wise king, life could be good, but a cruel or incompetent one could devastate the country. Even in today's constitutional monarchies, critics point out the cost of maintaining royal families that no longer hold real political power. Theocracy. In some places, religion became the government itself. A theocracy is ruled by religious authority, where leaders claim to act on behalf of God. Laws come directly from holy texts, not just human agreements. Imagine if your school were run entirely by your church, mosque, or temple. Every rule, from what you wear to how you behave, would follow religious doctrine. Iran today is a clear example where clerics hold ultimate authority above elected officials. Theocracies can unite communities through shared faith, but they can also restrict freedom. If you don't follow the majority religion, life becomes difficult. Questioning leaders may even be treated as questioning God, which makes it dangerous to speak out or seek change. Feudalism. As Europe entered the Middle Ages, a new system formed, feudalism. Power was divided between kings, nobles, and peasants. The king granted land to nobles, nobles offered protection to peasants, and peasants provided food and labor. Picture it as a pyramid of loyalty. At the top was the king, then the lords, then knights, and finally, peasants at the bottom. It was like paying for a subscription service. You gave crops and work, and in return, you received protection from raiders or armies. This system kept order in chaotic times, but it trapped most people in poverty. Peasants rarely had a chance to improve their lives, and everything depended on loyalty. If nobles turned against the king, kingdoms collapsed into war and chaos. Oligarchy. As societies evolved, some shifted into oligarchies, ruled by a few powerful people. These might be wealthy families, military leaders, or business elites. Imagine your school being run by the richest kids, who decided what everyone ate, wore, and studied. Ordinary students would have no say. Ancient Sparta operated as an oligarchy, with power shared by a small group of warrior elites. Many describe modern Russia as leaning toward oligarchy, with political and economic control concentrated in the hands of a few. Oligarchies can act quickly because only a handful of people make decisions, but they often lead to corruption, inequality, and resentment from the majority who feel excluded. Aristocracy. Aristocracy is a special form of oligarchy where noble families or those of high birth govern. Aristocrats believe their heritage made them naturally suited to rule. For centuries, Europe was run this way, with lords and dukes enjoying privilege while peasants struggled. The system offered stability and tradition, but it was unfair. Intelligence, talent, or hard work didn't matter if you weren't born into the right family. Revolutions eventually toppled many aristocracies because people grew tired of being locked out of power by birth alone. Then comes dictatorship. One leader holding absolute power, often seizing it by force. Dictatorships remove freedom of speech, crush opposition, and demand loyalty. Think of a classroom where one student storms up to the teacher's desk, declares themselves boss, and silences anyone who objects. That's dictatorship. Hitler's Nazi Germany and North Korea today are clear examples. Dictatorships can move fast on decisions since one person decides everything. But the price is high. Citizens live in fear, corruption spreads, and the entire country's future depends on one person's will. Fascism. Fascism is dictatorship supercharged with nationalism. The state is glorified, loyalty is demanded, and propaganda becomes part of daily life. Citizens are told to sacrifice everything for the nation. Imagine constant parades, posters everywhere, and leaders repeating the same slogans until they're drilled into your head. Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany are the classic cases. While fascism can unite people quickly under one banner, it almost always leads to war, oppression, and destruction of diversity. Dissent is crushed, and citizens lose individuality in the name of national strength. Communism. Communism aimed for a classless society where everyone shared resources equally. In theory, there'd be no rich or poor. The government would own land, factories, and businesses. Think of your whole town sharing one fridge, one car, and one bank account. Everyone contributes, and everyone gets what they need. The Soviet Union, Cuba, and modern China all tried or still practice versions of this. But in reality, communism often led to shortages and weak motivation. When the state owned everything, people had little incentive to innovate or work harder. Strong central governments also became oppressive, leaving little room for freedom. Socialism. Socialism took some ideas from communism but allowed more flexibility. Property could still be privately owned, but the government provided essential services like healthcare, education, and transportation. Imagine if your school cafeteria were free for everyone, funded by pooling everyone's money. Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Norway lean towards socialism, mixing it with capitalism. Socialism can create fairness and reduce poverty, but critics argue it comes with high taxes and sometimes inefficient governments that overspend or mismanage resources. Democracy, meaning rule by the people, gave citizens the power to choose leaders and shape laws. In ancient Athens, this meant direct democracy, where people voted on everything. Today, most democracies are representative. We elect leaders to decide on our behalf. It's like voting for a class president who speaks for the students. Democracies value freedom and rights, but they're not flawless. Decisions can be slow, messy, and costly. Majority rule may sometimes ignore minority voices, and campaigns can be influenced by money. Republic. A republic is democracy without a king or queen. Power lies with elected officials under a constitution. It's democracy with added structure and safeguards. The United States, France, and India are prime examples. Republics protect liberty and keep leaders in check, but they also face challenges. Political gridlock can paralyze governments when parties refuse to cooperate, and corruption can creep in when leaders prioritize themselves over the public. Presidential republic. In this model, the president is both head of state and head of government. They are elected directly by the people, as in the US or Brazil. It's a bit like electing a class president and then giving them authority over the teachers, too. This creates strong, centralized leadership, but it also concentrates a lot of power in one person. If the president misuses authority, the system struggles until the next election. Parliamentary republic. Here, citizens vote for a parliament, and the parliament selects a prime minister. Germany, Italy, and Israel follow this model. It's like students electing a council and the council picking who becomes class leader. Parliamentary systems encourage teamwork since leaders depend on parliament's support. But they can also be unstable, with governments collapsing if coalitions break apart, leading to frequent elections and uncertainty. Constitutional monarchy. We saw monarchy earlier, but the constitutional version blends tradition with democracy. A king or queen exists, but mainly as a symbolic figure, while elected officials actually govern. The UK, Japan, and Sweden use this model. It's like keeping a school mascot for pride and tradition, while the student council runs the rules. It satisfies history and identity, but critics argue it's outdated and costly, with taxpayers funding royal families who don't govern. Anarchy. Anarchy is the absence of government altogether. Everyone governs themselves. On paper, it means total freedom. In reality, it often turns into chaos. Picture your school with no teachers, no principal, and no rules. At first, it might feel exciting, but soon the strongest kids would dominate. Fights would break out, and organizing even basic things would become impossible. Without structure, safety, and stability quickly disappear. Modern hybrids, most countries today don't fit into a single category. Instead, they mix systems. China combines communist politics with capitalist economics. The UK blends monarchy with democracy. The US mixes federalism with a presidential republic. Hybrid systems adapt to history and culture, but they can also get messy. Different elements may clash, creating inefficiency, confusion, or power struggles between branches of government. And that's the world of governments, from tribal councils to modern hybrids, each with strengths, weaknesses, and lessons for the future.